Imagine finding a 2,000-year-old machine at the bottom of the ocean, opening it up and realizing it has more gears than your first car. That is basically what happened with the Antikythera Mechanism. And it's only one of several old technologies that still make historians, scientists, and engineers stop and say, wait, they were doing what? Not because ancient people had magic, and probably not because aliens were running a technical support desk in 200 BC. The real explanation is more interesting. People were incredibly clever. Knowledge could disappear. Manufacturing techniques could be forgotten. And sometimes we're left with the finished product, but no instruction manual. Let's start with the object that looks the most out of place. In 1901, sponge divers exploring a shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera recovered what looked like a badly corroded lump of bronze. Not exactly the kind of thing you put on the mantle. Then researchers noticed gears inside it. Lots of gears. The Antikythera Mechanism was an ancient Greek astronomical calculator, built more than 2,000 years ago. Its surviving fragments contain an incredibly complicated system of bronze gears that modeled astronomical cycles, tracked the sun and moon, predicted eclipses, and displayed calendar information. Basically, imagine opening a Viking treasure chest and finding a mechanical smartwatch. Modern X-rays, CT scans, inscriptions, and computer models have revealed much of how it worked, although researchers still debate details of the missing portions. But here's the part I love. It was found on a ship. Somebody packed one of the most sophisticated mechanical devices known from the ancient world onto a boat like, okay, we've got the statues, the wine, Steve's astronomical computer, everybody ready? Then the ship sank, which raises a fascinating question. Was this an extraordinary one-of-a-kind machine, or were there more? Bronze was valuable and routinely recycled, so history may have melted down other machines before anyone realized how interesting they were. Apparently, the ancient world's recycling program was a little too effective. And if losing an astronomical computer sounds bad, the Byzantines managed to lose the recipe for a flamethrower, Greek fire. Beginning in the 7th century, Byzantine forces used a terrifying incendiary weapon, especially in naval warfare. A flammable liquid could be projected toward enemy ships using specialized siphons. Remember, these ships were made largely from wood. So somebody looked at naval warfare and decided, you know what this needs? More fire. Greek fire could remain dangerous on water, and historical accounts describe it as extremely difficult to extinguish. But despite centuries of speculation, we still don't know the exact formula. Researchers generally suspect some kind of petroleum-based mixture, possibly combined with resins and other ingredients, but the chemical mixture was only half of the technology. The pumps, siphons, storage system, ignition method, and handling procedures all mattered. The Byzantines guarded that knowledge closely. Eventually, the complete system disappeared. Imagine developing one of your civilization's most valuable military technologies, protecting the password for centuries, and then somebody finally asks, who has the login? Nobody. Our next lost technology is less explosive, but significantly sharper. Damascus steel became famous for blades covered in distinctive flowing patterns that almost looked like water frozen into metal. The historical steel was associated with high-carbon crucible steel, and eventually the original production traditions faded. Then something strange happened. In 2006, scientists studying a genuine 17th-century Damascus saber reported finding nanoscale structures, including carbon nanotubes, inside the blade. For context, carbon nanotubes weren't formally identified by modern science until centuries after these blades were being produced. Now, medieval blacksmiths obviously weren't saying, Ahmed, the nanotube concentration is looking low today. They didn't know what a carbon nanotube was. The structures appear to have formed because of the materials and processing conditions used to create the steel. which somehow makes it even cooler. They were manipulating materials at an incredibly tiny scale without knowing that scale existed. And no, we don't need the old legends about Damascus swords magically cutting every other sword in half. The real metallurgy is weird enough. Then we reach Rome, where a nearly 2,000-year-old building has spent centuries quietly judging every cracked parking garage you've ever seen. The Pantheon. Its enormous unreinforced concrete dome has survived for almost 2 millennia. Roman concrete has fascinated researchers because some ancient structures have remained remarkably durable despite centuries of weather and environmental exposure. One important clue turned out to be something researchers had previously dismissed: tiny white chunks in the concrete called lime clasts. For years, these looked like evidence that somebody mixed the concrete badly. Then researchers studying Roman concrete found evidence that some of it had been produced using quicklime and a process called hot mixing. And those supposedly sloppy white chunks may actually help the material repair itself. When cracks develop and water enters, reactive calcium from these lime-rich areas can help form new minerals that fill the cracks. Researchers made Roman-inspired concrete, deliberately cracked it, ran water through it, and watched the cracks seal. Meanwhile, your driveway gets one tiny crack in January and immediately begins its lifelong dream of becoming the Grand Canyon. The Romans didn't leave us completely clueless about concrete. Ancient writers described construction materials and methods, but modern researchers are still discovering why certain Roman techniques worked as well as they did. Next, we travel to southern Peru, where ancient people decided the desert needed some decorations. Very large decorations. The Nazca Lines are a huge collection of geoglyphs created by removing darker stones from the desert surface and exposing the lighter ground beneath. There are enormous birds, monkeys, spiders, geometric shapes and lines stretching across the landscape. The internet sometimes turns this into "they can only be seen from airplanes, therefore aliens," which skips several steps. Ancient people were perfectly capable of planning huge geometric designs without aircraft. Think about a football field. The person painting the 50-yard line doesn't need a helicopter to check whether it's straight. They need measurements. Still, the scale of Nazca is incredible. Imagine your boss handing you some stakes and rope and saying, "Okay, today we're making a 300-foot monkey. Cool, where's the blueprint?" "This tiny drawing." "Can I go home?" "No, we haven't done the tail." What remains far more interesting is why so many geoglyphs were created and what they meant to the people who made and used them. Archaeologists have examined their relationships to ritual movement, landscape, water, astronomy, and other cultural practices, and questions about their meaning remain. And finally, we have something that technically isn't an ancient technology, but it's so strange that I'm keeping it anyway. The Voynich Manuscript. It's an illustrated manuscript from around the end of the 15th or beginning of the 16th century, and nobody has convincingly figured out what it says. The pages contain unfamiliar writing, strange plants, astronomical-looking diagrams, and illustrations of small human figures sitting in green pools connected by bizarre tubes. Because apparently every great historical mystery eventually requires weird plumbing. People have spent generations attempting to decipher the manuscript. Languages have been proposed, ciphers have been proposed, hoaxes have been proposed. People have claimed to solve it, and yet there is still no generally accepted decipherment. The Voynich Manuscript is particularly frustrating because the other mysteries give scientists something physical to attack. Damascus steel can go under a microscope. Roman concrete can be smashed apart and chemically analyzed. The Antikythera Mechanism can be scanned. The Voynich Manuscript just sits there with page after page basically saying, "Good luck." And that's probably the most interesting part of all of this. Ancient technology isn't impressive because people thousands of years ago secretly knew more than we do. They didn't. It's impressive because Human knowledge doesn't move forward in one perfectly straight line. Something can be invented, improved, protected, forgotten, and then rediscovered centuries later. A Greek craftsman could help build an astronomical computer whose technological tradition eventually disappeared. Byzantine engineers could operate an incendiary weapon system whose exact formula was lost. Roman builders used material techniques we're studying again almost 2,000 years later. And somewhere in medieval Europe, somebody wrote an entire mysterious book and apparently decided future historians needed a hobby. So maybe the biggest lesson here is simple. The next time archaeologists pull a weird, corroded lump out of a shipwreck, don't throw it in the miscellaneous box. It might be a computer.